Okay, welcome back. It is early June 1867. It has been a while since the last video. I do appreciate that once again. And this wasn't really kind of intentional by design in any way, although it seldom is, but I've actually had a problem with my PC. It seemed like a kind of graphics card related issue or maybe a driver issue. I don't think it was either of those things, as it turns out. I don't really know what it was, because despite everything that I did, which is to say update drivers and all kinds of stuff, it didn't really do anything. I mean, it increased my system performance because I defragged my hard drive. Basically, I was there was kind of like an intermittent buzzing noise, and if I moved my mouse cursor across the screen when there was a buzzing noise, it would periodically freeze, almost like my processor was jamming up for a split second. I don't know what it was. Anyway, I had it a few years ago, and I can't remember what I did to fix it, but I did something. And so I just did everything. Yeah, kind of fixed my system registry and all kinds of stuff, and I'd kind of given up and thought I'm going to have to just do a kind of fresh install of the operating system. And just as I'd kind of reached that conclusion, I got up the next day and the problem had gone, and I don't know why. So anyway, I didn't do any videos. I did try and do a video with the problem, but it was just so kind of irritating, and it was the buzzing kind of effect. I mean, it just made it kind of unwatchable. It just made it really, really awful, and I thought I can't do a video with this sort of really annoying buzzing thing, and it seemed to be really loud in the recording as well. So anyway, it's fixed now. So we're kind of we're back in business. It's been 6 months since the last video. Last one was in well, not in real life. It's been about 8 days, but it's the last video was what, I think in March. So not 6 months, 3 months. And there's not been any kind of massive developments. I mean, the army is now, I think it was even in March, is in the Ottoman Empire. It's back from kind of its theatre operations in Austria. Austria remains at war with Italy and the United Kingdom. Italy looks like it holds the region around Laibach, but Italy has formed. I don't think the Austrians are going to be able to kind of turn the clock back on that. I think Italy is an established fact now. I think really the conclusion of the war between Austria and Italy is really going to be about where the Italian frontier sort of with Austria lies really. But yeah, I think Austria's kind of hegemony in the Italian peninsula is over now, and we have another competitor in the Mediterranean, so that's making itself felt already, of course. And I've mentioned this before, but the Italians already are enjoying much more state revenue, having significantly increased their sort of territorial holds, and we're seeing that with more kind of colonial cards being played, more serious attempts now at kind of positioning themselves in the Horn of Africa. The Italians will have a claim on Libya and also Tunisia. I already mentioned Tunisia, so I won't kind of cover old ground there, but we'll keep an eye on. I mean, they can't really play any colonial cards in Tunisia. We've already formally integrated, Libya. We've already formally integrated Libya into the Ottoman Empire. Tunisia remains a halfway house. It's an influenced area. I think Piedmont Sardinia has a slight edge, a slight lead. It's probably followed by France, then by us. So yeah, in terms of what happens in Tunisia, as I say, we're kind of thinking about possibly pushing the envelope, seeing if we can kind of nudge ourselves into first place and secure Tunisia as a protectorate. But that would come with ramifications, of course, with both Italy and France, and that might be kind of overstepping the mark a little bit. We've got to be a little bit careful there. Where we are making some real kind of developments is because the Italians are prosecuting a more aggressive kind of attempt to increase colonial penetration in the Horn of Africa. We've decided that with a lot of our kind of overt security operations at Aden over, we are still maintaining some troops because we need some troops to increase our colonial penetration, especially in Aden itself, where we're conducting continuous pacification expeditions. We do need to have military forces in place to play that card, and that's required to lift the colonial penetration in Aden. It's at 49% now. In 12 turns time, if this comes off, it's going to be 50%. That will mean that Aden can be brought into formal colonial status and will join the kind of Persian Gulf states. And then it's just the Hejaz. I still think that we can make it. We've got 2.5 years. We can get the Hejaz in the bag in 2.5 years. If we do that, that's the Arabian Peninsula, game, set, and match. And once that's done, that's pretty much our real, actual colonial territories formally colonized. Keeping in mind that Hejaz was kind of almost a protectorate status, really. I think even in the First World War, and the Ottomans never really secured Kuwait or the Persian Gulf states, so we'd already be well ahead of where we were, and that would allow us to focus much more on the Horn of Africa. To that end, I've decided it's the first time that we've kind of declared war on anyone, actually, since the game has started, but it doesn't matter because it's just a tribal kind of society. We've declared war on the Somali tribes in East Africa. We have paid a little bit of a cost. They've destroyed a couple of our missions to the kind of northern Berbera and Busaso, but we've landed 2 Marine brigades, the 4th Marine Brigade in Mogadishu, and the 1st Marine Brigade just north in Hobayo. And the reason being is we want to begin to establish now a kind of military apparatus in Somalia. Having secured Mogadishu, there were a couple of engagements with Somali tribes, very easily mopped up. I mean, after the Yemenis, you know, these guys feel like an absolute cupcake. It's crazy. So we've secured Mogadishu straight away. We're plowing resources into the region. We already had a trade post and a mission, but it was important that those things weren't lost. We've got a colonial fort being built, a depot, and an anchorage. So we've instantly put some resources into this kind of project, and we're here for that. Means that we're here for the sort of long haul, really. For a sense of proportion, Mogadishu is quite a long distance from Constantinople. I mean, it's almost as far as kind of London to Halifax. You know, it's quite a long way off. I mean, the Ottomans did have a bit of a presence in the Horn of Africa anyway. In fact, we start off with some legacy presence in Eritrea and Djibouti, but we're going to be looking for a much more formal kind of presence now, with all the legalistic implications that come with that, which is to say, to drive colonial penetration up, so that we can secure, first of all, protectorate status for Somalia itself, also then Somaliland, and we are going to be looking at dispatching some forces to secure Eritrea. Djibouti might be a little bit tricky, because Djibouti, the French do have an interest in Djibouti, especially with the Suez Canal now open. You know, countries like Britain and France are going to be a little bit sensitive to the kind of transit routes. So it might be worth... I mean, the French have already got a colonial fort and a trade post in Djibouti. We still have... In fact, we still exercise military control, I think, for the most part. That'll change. It's merely an influence territory. In fact, Piedmont Sardinia has more colonial penetration than France. It's probably why France's colonial fort hasn't translated into any kind of military control. I don't like the idea of Piedmont Sardinia getting... I mean, if Piedmont Sardinia turned this into a protectorate, we might seek to challenge that. But France, it might be worth the concession, really. I mean, who needs it? You know, they'd make life difficult for us. They'd have a casus belli against us, I think, as well. If we're going to do Djibouti, we might as well do Tunisia, you know what I mean? And accept that France is going to be a colonial competitor between now and, like, 1920. And France won't always declare war on us when it's convenient. You know, there's a good chance we're going to be fighting wars with Russia in the coming decade, maybe. You know, the next 10 to 15 years, there is a historical war in the late 1870s that will probably happen. In real life, the Ottomans did very badly in that war. If that does kind of come to pass, we don't really want France moving into sort of Libya as that happens. So yeah, food for thought, really. Do we kind of roll the dice and accept that France is going to have to be a kind of colonial competitor, which means that there's prospect of war, or do we look for a slightly softer approach? You know, see Tunisia as a concession to France and Djibouti, in order really to kind of keep the peace and to have a kind of, you know, a great power that's a Western European power that is sympathetic towards us, as they have been for the most part. You know, there are times where, for example, the French had a casus belli against us. If you remember, in the 1850s, we had the Lebanese revolt. They didn't, you know, they didn't decide to pursue that, in part because we had fairly good relations with them. It would be difficult to maintain good relations with them if we controlled Tunisia and Djibouti. So we need to think about it. I've not decided yet, but we are going to have a colonial competitor in the form of Italy. So yeah, we're going to try and develop now a military operation in Somalia, with Mogadishu as the main kind of center, the source of supply, the main port, and ultimately militarily occupy this region. This will make it much easier for us to play colonial cards. It means that colonial infrastructure, like missions and trade posts, it means those things are going to be secure. It means that, you know, like, it means that the Somali tribes won't be able to do anything about it, basically. We don't want to invest huge amounts of resources that they suddenly decide, as they did with the Italians, that they don't want us there and destroy all of that. So we're not going to make the same mistake as the Italians. And like I say, we're going to look... we're definitely going to be looking at doing Eritrea, and we'll leave Djibouti as an option, maybe, for the future. that's it in terms of our kind of colonial plans for the next few years. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So we'll see a gradual development of military control in Somalia. So we've got the 1st Marine Brigade a little bit further north of Mogadishu. Once that's secure, we'll put colonial forts. And, yeah, we'll press those forces north, I think. The economy is rebounding. We had a little bit of a difficult time after the war. I mean, in the immediate aftermath, it was okay. But then we've seen a fairly significant drop-off in domestic market sales. That has picked up now. Domestic market sales are starting to pick up, and exports have really started to pick up as well. We've got a good balance of trade, again, which, trade balance has become increasingly difficult with increasingly complex and sophisticated economy. It has required us to import more and more commodities. And I kind of, again, in the last video, I looked into a little bit into the kind of, the ecology of how our economy works, how, one kind of commodity has this kind of knock-on effect now, and means that we are dependent on imports, and with that we are dependent on ensuring that maritime transit routes are secured in the event of future conflicts. That didn't really matter before. In past conflicts, if we were completely sealed off from trade, we would lose some income, but it wouldn't really have any serious, practical, harmful impact to the economy. Those days are over. We are now an industrial power, very much so. So we need to kind of keep that in mind. We are continuously developing new kinds of industries. That kind of, so for example, steel. We still have a positive income of steel, but it's not much. It's a very, very small amount. So we're looking to increase our steel production. That in turn increase demands for coal, but coal production for the moment is fairly good. And as I said, we're kind of locked into timber imports really for the foreseeable future. There are some options with kind of timber that I've been looking at. Now, this is where really colonies stop being an abstract thing that's tied into like national prestige. It's where, the real kind of colonial question really is always going to be commodities and resources. We're starting to look at Indochina again. The reason being is, well, the French have played a quite surprisingly disappointing game here. They've managed to get a toehold in Cambodia, and Cambodia, I think, is now a French protectorate. But in terms of the rest of Vietnam, for example, now Vietnam, for colonial purposes, is not one single polity. It's broken into different regions. Now, in the south, around Saigon, the French do have substantial colonial penetration, averages out 42%. So they could bring that into kind of protectorate status. And they've got a kind of smattering of colonial buildings, but not many. So, for example, they don't really have an average colonial penetration in the regions around Saigon that's at 40%. So they actually wouldn't be able to bring it in. They've got a good colonial penetration in Saigon, but in the kind of the provinces outside, they've got a very, very tenuous penetration, really. In the area around Hue, which is the old imperial capital, you can see it's got a little capital designation there. France has fairly substantial colonial penetration. They still don't have quite enough. They've got 35% in, is it Toulon? Just south of Hue. That's not enough. They did 40% colonial penetration there to sort of lift this area into protectorate status. We already had, if you remember, a mission there from the 1850s. We were toying with the idea of getting a bit of a toehold. We're going to do the same now, again. We're going to mostly focus on sort of merchants, trading. We've got good access to timber in Hue, for example, but also in North Vietnam, there's timber, tobacco, tea, rice. So we don't have any access to tea at all, nor rice, but also coal, iron. So this is a fairly resource-rich region, and if the French are going to drag their feet with this, I don't see why we don't kind of make the most out of that, really. Again, we don't want to get ourselves into a position. We might, with a whole load of regions, Djibouti, Tunisia, we might position ourselves at some point with a crossroads with France. Do we make France, an opponent or not? And to tell you the truth, if we're going to go with yes, we might as well push for all of these regions. But Vietnam is particularly interesting because it's so resource rich. Laos as well, to the north. Laos has got, you're getting good access to timber and tea. Tropical fruits, which we know is a very lucrative commodity at this time. So yeah, appealing. We were very late with Sumatra. Options are open with Sumatra later on, of course. Sumatra is now a Dutch colony proper, but we could look to kind of conduct an expedition against the Dutch at some point, and we will be doing that. We are going to be looking to kind of try and get a toehold in the Pacific. And I mean, the opportunity here, even if we just get this region, even if we just get Hue, for example, the old imperial capital, that would be a toehold. You know, we could get a military base there, and with that, this would also allow us to project military power against the Dutch, for example, and in sort of the Dutch East Indies, against maybe Spain and the Philippines. So these are options for the future, you know. But there's no real reason why the Dutch, which is a very weak European power, or the Spanish really should have Pacific possessions, and we, you know, an empire which has occupied Vienna twice in the last decade, should not. I mean, it seems absurd, really. So we could kind of rectify that sort of strange kind of power distortion. We're probably going to keep out of Burma because I mean, Burma ends up being a part of the kind of Raj, really. So we don't want to kind of don't want to get kind of wrapped up there and upset the British too much. But yeah, the French, you know, we could position ourselves as a competitor to the French. We'll revisit that question, I think. But we're certainly going to invest some resources, so the option is there, I think, to do that. I think that's pretty much it for this update report. Not a huge amount, really. But yeah, I guess the next video will be, what is it, early June. Probably be towards the end of this year, October, November. I don't think there's any likelihood of this problem repeating on my system. I had it again a few years ago, and I think I had some kind of I downloaded some sort of freeware that dealt with software conflicts. It was like DOS based, you know, so I had to manually figure out what the conflict was, and I resolved it. It's quite hard to find good freeware now. It used to be really, really easy. You could just type it into Google, but now everything's weighted, I suppose, towards kind of, you know, commercially viable search results. It ended up being very difficult to find anything this time around. But anyway, so yeah, sorry for leaving it 8 days, and for it being a rather brief report anyway. As it is, there wouldn't have been too much to say on this business report, but I'll keep you in the loop with regard to the campaign. And as I say, we'll do a kind of campaign diary, probably kind of autumn time this year. So yeah, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.